it's a beautiful time for sustainability because the consumers want it. The governments are starting to mandate it. And businesses, right now, it's a great time because if you do it, you gain more customer loyalty, you gain more sales, you gain more revenue, you gain more customers. So it's a great time to be doing it versus if companies that wait another 5 to 10 years, they're going to have to do it anyway because the legislation is coming. But you don't get as much benefit from the consumer because now everybody else has already done it. And so if you just wait to do it, then the customers will have so many choices on the shelf for sustainable products for the companies that went first.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Wisenetix Podcast episode. As always, we're having some awesome people here for us, to interview and learn with. And in today's interview, I'm going to have Jim Lamancusa. Jim is the Executive Director at Pet Sustainability Coalition. Jim, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's great having you. Jim, we like to start our conversations learning a little bit more about our guest speakers. So if you could share a little bit about yourself and your story.
Well, I guess, from a business side, I've been in what we call CPG, so consumer packaged good industry for the past 25 years. And I've been in a couple different industries within CPG. So I started my career with Eco Products, which was a compostable and biodegradable food service packaging company. So think like cups made from corn plastic and plates made from sugarcane. So really sustainably focused, and it was a way for companies, if they wanted to be zero waste in all of their food service packaging, they could do it through our company. And so it was a really amazing experience for me because I was hired as the first salesperson, like street level salesperson, and we were doing about $1 million in revenue. And within 5 years, we grew to 75 million. And I was managing a team of 22 people. And then the company was acquired. So I've since gotten my MBA, but I always joke that I actually got more of a business education by growing eco products like that, more than my MBA. And so after that acquisition, one of the board members at Eco Products invited me to become their vice president of sales and marketing at Goodbelly, which was a probiotic juice drink company and sold in the natural grocery channel. So did that for 5 years, and then I moved over. My passion is outdoors, and so I spend most of my time hiking and backpacking, camping, river rafting. And so being in the outdoor industry has always been really enticing for me. And so I moved over to the outdoor industry and worked with Dinafit and Salewa. Salewa is the third largest outdoor brand in Europe. So really large outdoor company, and we were building their North American division. So we started really small. Again, it was like $2 million. And within 5 years, we were at 22 million. So really quite a bit of growth there. And now, this is probably 15 years into my career, and I've now grown several brands significantly. And I always had the dream to have my own company. And so in 2015, I started Kusa Tea and Coffee, which is the world's best tasting instant tea and coffee. So I invented a new technology to dehydrate beverages. So instead of using freeze drying or spray drying, which are high heat or really low temperature dehydration, I modified this botanical extraction process to make an instant tea and coffee that tastes as good, if not better, than your regular tea and coffee. And so I grew that brand for 7 years and then sold it in April of last year. And then, from a personal side, like now I've had that experience. It was great. I was looking for the next venture I wanted to do something good for the planet. And like we are definitely in a climate crisis in the world, and we all need to dig in. And so when I was looking for my next job, I wanted to find an organization that was directly affecting climate change. And the Pet Sustainability Coalition is one of those companies. And so we are in the pet industry. And so we are helping companies in the pet industry become more sustainable with their ingredients, with their packaging. And some statistics that are pretty amazing is like pets consume 30% of the proteins that are raised in the world. So when you talk about like climate impact, the pet industry has a significant impact on the environment with all the ingredients that we use.
Wow.
So that's a little bit about me from the business side of things. And then personal side, like I said, I love to be outside. Most of my weekends are spent mountain biking, rock climbing. Now we're getting into ice climbing and backcountry skiing season. So again, most days on the weekend, you'll find me up in Rocky Mountain National Park or Vail or Breckenridge skiing, and or Ouray, which has some of the best ice climbing in the world, really. And so that's where I love to spend my time. Besides the outdoors, I also run a nonprofit meditation center in Denver. So it's a 11,000 square foot, so I guess like 3,000 square meter meditation center, and we have 500 members. It's a volunteer thing, but I really believe that working with your mind is one of the most important things that we can do, because it's not outside things that affect us. It's how we perceive it as your mind. So working with your mind can literally change your world.
This is awesome. This is very interesting. I remember when we met for the first time, you were sharing a little bit about your background, and it was like, just, that's some inspiration. Love outdoor as well, not doing as much as I wish, but yeah, that's great. And we're going to have the opportunity to explore a little bit more those experiences. And for us to start talking about business experiences and what you've learned throughout your career, the next question is, how would your parents describe what you do today?
I think that they would say that I'm trying to save the planet. So ultimately, it's hard for them to understand different protein sourcing for pet food. They can understand like recycled packaging and things, but sustainability can be a little bit difficult. There's so many different ways to affect sustainability. So for them, there's Jim is out there trying to save the world.
Pretty accurate, I would say, at least on a high level, although specifics might not be precise. They know the objective. And I think that's the most important. Jim, so you have this impressive journey across, different industries and having your own company, growing a business from $1 million to over 70 million revenue in 5 years. So what are some key lessons that you've learned about growing businesses during all these experiences you had?
Key lessons, I would say number one is you have to understand your customer. So one of the things I've noticed, and this is actually really applicable even with the Pet Sustainability Coalition, is just because the business has always done things a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to continue to do it that way, or that that's what the customer is looking for. That businesses evolve and products evolve. And I think it's really damaging for businesses to always do things the way that they've always done it because they're afraid of failure. So, of course, you have to keep, your certain core products and services stable for the customer, but then you should be innovating and talking to your customer to understand what they're truly looking for.
Absolutely, and yeah, that's something that always comes to our conversations, and that's but I don't think we ever get tired of emphasizing that, the importance of looking at the customers. I think one of the challenges is sometimes we apply frameworks and tools to try to, talk to customers, interview them, understand their or even observe their routines and what they do, their challenges. But I think sometimes we need more depth when it's about applying those knowledges, right? It's pretty common for people to say, yeah, you need to understand your customers, but the challenge is, okay, how do you apply those things you've learned, right? How has it been for you? How do you manage to make those things a reality in your business?
It isn't easy, and it's an easy thing to say, yes, understand your customer, but then how do you do it? How do you measure it? And how do you make the changes that are appropriate for your business? And unfortunately, it's not something that there's one specific way that every single company should do. Like if you're a service-based business, it's different than if you're a product-based business, but you have to keep that customer learning key, like understand what their problems are, why they're buying your products, what need are you solving in their lives? If you truly understand that, then you'll continue to put out the best products. And if you're solving their problems, and ultimately, I always say products come down to making, you're selling happiness. Like somebody wants to buy something because inherently it makes them happy. Like buying the right pet food for your pet makes you happy. And so the consumers are constantly looking for which product is going to serve my needs that ultimately will make me happy. And if you can sell that, then you'll be more successful. And I think that the brands that are doing that and connecting with the customer, like sustainability, 82% of customers are buying based on sustainability now. So if you can really integrate those sustainability core metrics in your business, then you will ultimately grow faster. And I always say that it's a win-win. Like if businesses are doing things that help the planet, and consumers buy more products because of it, and those businesses grow, then it's a win-win.
Perfect. Now talking about business growth, again, you shared and I mentioned also, you helped growing 70 times the revenue of a company in 5 years. That's pretty impressive for me.
Yeah.
What do you think are key strategies? And I'll switch the word strategies here, but key concepts that you believe are important or crucial for you to, scale a company, help a company to scale quickly.
Well, I mean, obviously, if you understand the consumer, then you will be able to sell more products because the consumers will be looking for it. But you also have to make sure that you have the infrastructure to support that growth. That there have been many times in my career that you end up the demand is outstripping the supply, and that creates its own problem. And if consumers can't buy your products, or your customers can't buy your product because you don't have enough bandwidth or enough supply, then they'll go somewhere else. And then it's oftentimes that they won't come back. So you really have to understand what ability you have to service those customers and how much supply can you build. So again, it's going to be different for every company, but understanding that if you're a service-based company, and for every 10 new clients you bring on, that means an additional employee that you need to be hiring and training, then you have to have that built into your business model. And in essence, having somebody ready for every 10 new customers that you hire. Or if you're a product-based company, saying that every time that we launch into 100 new stores, we need to have a new operations person to help manage that. So really getting down to the nitty-gritty to understand what the resources you need to have. Another one is cash flow. Do you have enough cash to support it? Because running a product-based business is extremely cash intensive, because you're always spending money before you get paid for it. Mm-hmm. So when I ran Cusa Tea and Coffee, it was a 9-month cash flow. So I would spend money to buy tea and coffee, and then it would go through the processing and packaging, and then it would get shipped over here. Then it would get shipped out to my customers, and then the customers would pay me. There was a 9-month time frame from when I would be spending money to when I got money back. So you have to understand what that cash flow is to know that if you're going to grow by $2 million, that means that you need to have that $2 million at a bare minimum 9 months before. So do you have the cash reserves to grow? So I've seen a lot of companies get into those cash flow crunches when they grow really quickly, because they weren't prepared for the amount of money that they would have to spend to grow that fast.
Yeah. So everything in terms of infrastructure, from people to money to machinery, and all that is involved. Okay, that's it. A good one. And you brought Cusa Tea and Coffee here, and when you were explaining how you founded the company, that you came up with a new solution. And by the way, I want to taste those. I want to try those teas and coffees. You created this new technology for dehydrating tea and coffee, so it doesn't taste as usual instant coffee and tea. How important is it for you, innovation in driving business growth, especially in sustainability?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's everything. Innovation drives growth, period. So, when it comes to sustainability, a lot of the things that we're moving towards for sustainability are innovative solutions. So, for example, packaging is really important to the customer. And because when a customer buys a bag of pet food, and then they feed it to their pet, what they're left with at the end is trash. And so even though the irony is that almost 80% of the environmental impact of pet food is what's inside the bag, what the customer is left with is the packaging at the end. And they want to do something with it versus sending it to a landfill. So there's technology that exists now. It's called monomaterial packaging that can be recycled versus multi-layered material, which can't be recycled easily. And so the technology exists now, but the brands have to commit to moving their packaging into this monomaterial. And there can be some differences with shelf life or durability that they have to work through with the manufacturers, and they can get through it. But that innovation is critical to actually moving into a more sustainable solution. But then you can put on the packaging that this is ready to be recycled. So if you live in a municipality that has the ability to recycle that monomaterial, then it's ready to go. So that should entail, in turn, then drive more consumer loyalty and purchasing behavior from the customer. So there's innovation on the packaging side, and then there's innovation on the ingredient side. So like I said, 80% of the environmental impact is what's inside the bag. And most of our pets, they need protein, or all of our pets need protein. It's very difficult to make a pet food that's like vegan or vegetarian. Like the animals are carnivores, and so they need to have some sort of a protein source. And the differences between so there's a like human grade food for pet food packaging, which would basically be like chicken breasts and steak. That's actually the worst thing you can do environmentally. What you should be using is the byproducts from the animal. So once you slaughter a cow, all of the muscle meat goes to human consumption, but then you have all of this co-product afterwards. So all of the organs, like the tongues, the shavings from the meat that aren't for human food consumption, it is extremely nutritious for the pets to eat it. And it's a second stream for the use for that animal. So we're using the whole animal. So that type of innovation, so using those co-products as innovation. There's also a lot of novel ingredient like insect protein and fermented or lab-grown meat proteins are really innovative right now. And it's still, the consumers are still deciding if they want to feed that to their pets, but it is a new innovation that's really exciting from an environmental standpoint.
Their communication should play their role also about explaining, and because again, lots of people, as I mentioned, especially I'd say in pet food, and that's just my perception, but there is this demand from customers for more sustainable. So once they see it's something more sustainable, you're helping the world, it's giving the nutrition your pet needs. Basically, we need to make it like tasty, tasty. Right. So they want to consume it, and their pets are also happy, not only them. And making a link here. So, okay, we see demand from customers for more sustainable solutions. There's a cost related here for companies. It's not something like, it's probably easier doing things differently, like they are not differently, like they always been done. How do you see the importance, and how are like governmental institutions and organizations playing their role here? Do you see like a push from their side as well, not only on demanding from companies saying, hey, you must use this, but also creating incentives for them to be more sustainable? What's happening right now in the industry?
Great question. There's a lot happening. So sustainability for the past 10 to 20 years, I would say is more of like a carrot approach, where it's a good thing to have. You're going to drive more consumer demand. Now there's more of the stick behind it. So there is government regulations around sustainability to help reduce emissions. And so the two main ones that I'll bring up are in the United States, the Securities and Exchange Commission, so SEC, recently passed legislation that all publicly traded companies, large publicly traded companies, have to do their carbon scope 1 and 2 emissions reporting. So they basically have to look at the carbon emissions that they are generating as a company. So scope 1 and scope 2 are required. In Europe, the legislations are far deeper. So they have what's called the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. It's a whole suite. We could do a whole podcast around it, but it's a whole suite of reporting requirements that companies have to go through. Right now, in 2024, large companies have to report. Next year, it's mid-sized companies. After that, it goes down to the medium and small size companies. So all companies across Europe, as well as companies that sell into Europe, have to report on these initiatives. And so they have to measure their carbon emissions, they have to set specific goals to reduce them, and then they have to report on it. So it's pretty fascinating to see that work. And it's working, because Europe has reduced their carbon emissions by 32% compared to 1990. So, and they've set a goal of 50% reduction by 2030. And by 2050, they want to be basically carbon neutral. So those types of initiatives are vast and growing really quickly because we all see the effects of climate change. And so I think that it's a beautiful time for sustainability because the consumers want it. The governments are starting to mandate it. And businesses right now, it's a great time because if you do it, you gain more customer loyalty, you gain more sales, you gain more revenue, you gain more customers. So it's a great time to be doing it versus if companies that wait another 5 to 10 years, they're going to have to do it anyway because the legislation is coming. But you don't get as much benefit from the consumer because now everybody else has already done it. And so if you just wait to do it, then the customers will have so many choices on the shelf for sustainable products for the companies that went first.
No, that's awesome and very important. I always ask myself about like what's the best way for deal with those sorts of challenges we have, especially when it comes to sustainability. But I mean, I think we must have legislation, and not only the legislation, but also finding ways, not only not just punishing companies for not doing the best thing, but also creating, an environment for them to succeed with those actions. So bringing incentives, if that's how you pronounce it, for them to do the right thing. And Jim, so you worked for other companies, then you had your own company, met their objective that goal you had, and then now another objective you have, looking at the world, helping the world somehow, especially when it comes to sustainability. So you started in for-profit markets, and then you shifted to non-profit organizations, right? How does that? What inspired you to make this shift, and how does your previous experiences help you today?
Great question. I think a couple ways. So I moved, like I said before, I moved into nonprofit because I wanted to do something to help the planet. And so I embedded sustainability in all the brands that I've worked for in my own company. But, I can make a small impact as one company. I can make a massive impact when I'm working with, we have over 250 members in the Pet Sustainability Coalition. And if you add up all the revenue that our companies do annually, it's over $325 billion in revenue. So it's just a huge impact for working with so many companies to drive sustainability. And when the board of directors hired me, they said that they wanted somebody that knew what it was like to be on the for-profit side, because all of our members are for-profit businesses. So, it doesn't, if you try to like you were saying, like shove sustainability down people's throats and force them to do it, you're not going to get very far. So having run for-profit businesses, I understand that push and pull, because sometimes things are more expensive to do it sustainably. Now, hopefully you're getting more customer revenue and loyalty because you're doing it, but still there can be a cost up front to do it. And so for me, I know what it's like to have that push and pull with a company. And so when I work with our members, they tell me they love it. They know that I've been on their side. I've been where they're sitting. And so I can help understand, like, hey, let's go for, there are so many sustainability initiatives that you can take that actually will save your company money. So that's what I call like the low-hanging fruit. Let's go for that first to save you money. Then we can start looking at what things might cost you a little bit more, but would drive more customer loyalty and hopefully more revenue. And then, there are a lot of companies out there that are really profitable, and it's really important for them to give back to the planet and help the planet. And so there are other initiatives that are expensive for them to do, but they want to do it. They want to offset all of their carbon because they really believe it's the right thing to do for the planet.
Perfect. So different levels of incremental things you can do on your strategy. I think starting is the most important one, right? Having the understanding that you need to make that step forward and drive your business towards a destiny where everything is more sustainable. And thinking about this and this consumer demand for sustainability, what do you think are the biggest challenges that companies encounter? Is it profitability? What's that? To create more eco-friendly products and services.
It really depends on what you're trying to do. There, like I said, there are certain initiatives that you can do as a company that will save you money. So a lot of our manufacturers, so doing wastewater audits, doing energy audits, replacing their lights with LED lighting, low flow toilets, putting solar panels, they repay themselves pretty quickly. So there's certain things that they can do that will save them money, and it's better for the environment. And then if you shift and you say, okay, well, Now we're looking at the products themselves. Well, if you go towards recycled packaging, for example, the cost increase is between 2 and 4%. So that is a cost for the business. But again, now the customer, you can put it on your packaging that it is ready to be recycled. So again, that can drive more customer demand and loyalty. If you're talking about innovative ingredients, there are some really amazing ingredients that are like carbon negative ingredients, like algae, for example. Mm-hmm. But those can be more expensive than just buying regular chicken co-product. So you have to understand what your customers are looking for. And I think that a lot of, you have to understand like customers are willing to pay, like all the surveys, customers are willing to pay more for a sustainable product, but it can't be double the price. So there does have to be this middle ground to say customers are willing to spend 8 to 10% more for a sustainable product. But after that, it's only going to be a small percentage of customers that have a lot of disposable income.
Perfect. Yeah, you need to consider the reality of your customers as well. Lots of times they want to buy more sustainable products, but then there's a cost for them, and there's just limitations. Sometimes they won't have the revenue, the money to do it. So it's interesting, and interesting figures as well. Like it's 10% range is like, okay, it's not that expensive. I can make this and be happier because I know that I'm helping the world somehow. And considering all this environmental impact that the pet food industry has, you mentioned like 30%, close to 30% of the proteins produced go to pet food.
That's right.
What do you see as the most promising innovations and trends that can drive a meaningful change?
The biggest one is to use the whole animal. So these chicken and fish and cows, they are raised for human food. So finding, we're involved with the USDA, the United States, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and they just awarded us a grant, a $250,000 grant at PSC to help connect regenerative agriculture, beef and bison, with pet food companies that want to use their byproducts and co-products. Because right now, the farmers and ranchers are raising that meat for human consumption, but they don't have the connections to sell the rest of the animal to pet food companies. And so you look at these animals, like regenerative agriculture is so exciting to help fight climate change. But so we want to use those whole animals. So it's really like connecting those sources of regenerative agriculture, beef, bison, chicken, fish, with the pet food companies that make those products. So there's a 90% emissions reduction. So if we work with brands, there's I haven't mentioned this yet, but we were just get partnered up with a platform called How Good, which is the world's largest sustainability data platform. So you can look at every single ingredient that is within. It was built for the human food industry, and now we're their partner within the pet food industry. So we can work with a pet food company and go through every single ingredient in their products and show them the environmental impact of each ingredient, as well as the whole product in totality. And when you move, it's like, so for example, if we work with a brand that uses like chicken breasts as their first ingredient, like 60 to 70% of the product, if you move that to a chicken co-product or byproduct, there's a 90% emission reduction. So we can show them from a data perspective. So you talk about like legislation as well as just setting company goals, that a company can come out and say, we want to reduce emissions by 50% within the next 5 years. Well, ingredients are the way to do it. And we can help them say, like, if you switch from powdered cellulose, which is it's a tree, so it's a cut up powderized tree that uses a lot of water to get to that powdered cellulose. If you replace it with this amazing grass called miscanthus that is regenerative back into the soil, there is like a 50% reduction in emissions and a 90% reduction in water usage. So we try to help educate brands on how they can do that to make those emission and water reduction, hit those targets.
Perfect. And I think it touched the point here. It's all about education. Sometimes we are just blind to those solutions, and they might be very close to us. And even if I think, and I'm not sure if I'm thinking it right, but when we're thinking about co-products, you're not only reducing emissions and being more sustainable, but it should be cheaper as well, right? You're not finding, you're not buying it chicken breast, which humans would like to eat as well. So, and for us to wrap up here, Jim, I'm loving this conversation. So good insights, not only about sustainability, but also about business, which is at the end of the day, how the world is. Um, Looking ahead, what advice would you give to, that's my last question. What advice would you give to business leaders who want to integrate sustainability into their growth strategies? And I know we covered this already, but for us as well to emphasize like the most important things. How do they make this happen? What are the first steps?
The first step, so there's something within sustainability called a materiality survey. So materiality means what are the things that are most material to your business? And each business is going to be unique. So there's basically a project that can be done by, if you're in the pet industry, you can work with PSC. If you're in other industries, you can work with other consultants to help you do it. But if you conduct this materiality survey, that you're basically surveying internal employees and then external stakeholders like your customers, your retailers, you can identify what are the most material things that affect sustainability within your business. That has to be step one. You have to understand what can you impact, because it's very different. If you're a retailer, the things that you can affect are very different than a manufacturer, than a brand that maybe co-packs their products. So doing that would be my number one suggestion, is you have to start with that materiality survey that can identify the most material things for your business.
Perfect. That's good. And anything in addition to that after the first step?
Yeah. So once you've identified those material things, then you start to say, okay, now we know what we can affect. And then you start to set goals and say, hey, if energy usage is the number one thing that we can affect, then we want to set goals to reduce our energy use by 10% per year for the next 5 years. And then you say, okay, what do we need to do to achieve that? We need to replace our lighting with LED. We need to look at solar panels. We need to look at wind power. So just as an example, there's setting goals is really important, and then tracking goals. So there's a concept out here like greenwashing is becoming a big problem. There's actually legislation now in the EU. It's called anti-greenwashing legislation, because a lot of companies are claiming things that are not actually more sustainable. And so consumers now, 57% of consumers are skeptical of the claims that brands are making.
Yes.
So what we always recommend to a company is that you set goals and then you clearly communicate to the consumer those measurable targets and how you're progressing towards them. So you don't just make big statements like, we're natural, we're eco-friendly, we're environmentally friendly. Well, how? The customer is getting smart. They want to know, have you reduced your emissions? Have you reduced your water usage? Have you implemented supply chain codes of conduct with your supply chain? Have you implemented more animal welfare policies? So the customer wants to know how and why. So my recommendation is to be really specific with what you want to achieve and then measure your progress towards it.
Awesome. Identify, define the goals, and then measure it. And this thing about the greenwashing, not in sustainability, but if we look even, I don't know, for human nutrition, so many things you can buy in the market with those beautiful and that look very healthy packages, and then when you look at the nutritional table and the information, it's like, okay, that's not very very healthy. But
No.
Yeah, communication can
That's right.
mislead people. Jim, thank you so much for all the things that you shared. I'm sure that our listeners are learning a lot with us today. Any suggestion for our audience today in terms of books, movies, podcasts, documentaries for them to, especially in the sustainability side, for them to get aware of what's going on in the industry?
I mean, so there's another organization called Sustainable Brands, and they put on some great trade shows and webinars and events. And so if you're a brand within sustainability beyond just the pet industry, I think Sustainable Brands is a good organization. They have free webinars that you can attend and really help you understand the sustainability initiatives that are affecting all of consumer packaged goods. And then from a business leader perspective, my favorite book for a business leader is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And I think that those I've used that in all the organizations I've worked in to implement that through my leadership team, so they understand. I think that those 7 habits do drive a lot of success in the business if they're really incorporated.
That's love. I need to read this one because I think it's the third time someone suggests this book, so I need to. No, it's a definition. I'm gonna buy it today. And thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for sharing all this information with us, the audience. Where can our listeners find you online in case they want to connect?
They can find me on LinkedIn, Jim Lamancusa. I'd love to connect, and I appreciate your time, Ricardo. This has been a lot of fun.
It's been a lot of fun. And for you that is in our audience, have been listening to us, thank you for your company, and I hope to see you all in our next episode.